This is the first edition of a new series for our YouTube channel. We're going to call it Just Baseball Editorial for now. This is Ryan Finkelstein. I am the managing editor at Just Baseball. I got Clay Snowden here, one of our very talented writers, and we're going to start breaking down some of the articles we're putting out at justbaseball.com. And Clay had a great article that went out today titled, "Where Were We Way Too Quick to Judge the Cincinnati Reds Offseason?" We'll leave a link to the article in the description of the episode. But the general premise here is I remember in the offseason, everybody was piling on the Reds. They sold too early. This was a team that was right there last year. If the expanded playoffs was in place, they would have made it. Yet, if you look at all the moves, which we're going to do today, I think that they actually had a pretty solid offseason. First things first, the decision to sell. It makes sense, but I understand why Reds fans are upset about it. What's your take on just the direction that this organization is going in?
I think that they built a team in 2019 when they added Nicholas Castellanos and Wade Miley, Shogo Akiyama, Mike Moustakas. They built a team, and that was the most they've ever spent in an offseason. The Cincinnati Reds. Everyone says they don't spend money. Well, they didn't just a few years ago, and it didn't work out. They built a team to hit the ball out of the ballpark. The defense, they just didn't even worry about. And in the end, you had one playoff appearance in 2020, expanded playoffs, did not score a run in 2 games. And then 83 win, I think, was the exact total in 2022. And I think that they saw the writing on the wall and just decided it's time to regroup and focus more towards that 2024 window, move off of some money, and clear up some space.
And they did that. And I think we can go through all of these different, moves that they made. And I think the one that was most widely panned at the time, I think, was just because of the fact that they got nothing for him, was basically just not picking up Wade Miley's option. And they put him out there and the Cubs claimed him and he had a great season last year. And so you thought, all right, well, they could have at least held on to him and traded him for something. But this year he's been hurt. And so you also talk about how they went out and got Mike Minor. He's been hurt. So your kind of conclusion there was, really, I mean, no harm, no foul, right?
Yeah, to me, the Wade and Miley thing, there just has to be more than what we know. He was a 4 or 5 WAR player at
Yeah.
age 34 last year at $10 million. Like $10 million is what Jordan Lyles is getting. That's what Kyle Freeland's getting. It's kind of back end of the rotation price. And nobody wanted him. There's no way the Reds just said, we're just going to dump him on, not pick up his option without first checking
Yeah.
the pickup and trade. There's just no way that can be true. They may not be great at their jobs if you think that, but they're not that bad. I think that they knew about some injury. He was injured in 2020 as well and near the end of 2021. So the Cubs got him, and he's been injured pretty much all year. He's been on the IL twice. And then they acquired Mike Minor in the most bizarre move, trading Amir Garrett, a relief pitcher, for Mike Minor. And the only thing I've even heard that somewhat makes sense is ridiculous too. They acquired Mike Minor right after they got rid of Sonny Gray, both Vanderbilt grads. Who was their pitching coach at Vanderbilt? Derek Johnson, the current pitching coach in Cincinnati.
Mm.
They're like somebody like it's kind of a thing going around, and I'm not saying it's true that like when they traded when they traded Sonny Gray, like Derek Johnson was just not happy, and they thought like, okay, well, we'll bring in this 1 year vet to stabilize the rotation, a guy that you know well, a guy that you would want to have on your team, and kind of keep one of the better, I guess, um, coaches on the coaching staff happy.
Yeah. And look, I think that at the time people were saying, well, why not just keep Miley and keep Garrett and the money's the same? But I don't think that that's the type of move to freak out about. And I think you look at Tucker Barnhart as another one where, again, was he a good Red for a long time? Is he a solid MLB veteran catcher? Absolutely. But you got a prospect. And really the main thing was opening the door for Tyler Stevenson to really be the catcher of the future for the Reds.
And you hear all the time when Tucker was around how important he was to the locker room, how much the organization respected him, and how much he respected them. And sometimes when you're in a situation like that and the writing's on the wall that, hey, listen, we have someone who's taking your job, you have 1 year left on your contract. It's the right relationship thing to do, to say, instead of keeping him as a $6 or $7 million backup, and being really solid at the position. It's, hey, we're going to give you a new opportunity, a place to start in Detroit, a place that needs a catcher and someone to guide the young pitching staff. It's not always like a video game.
Yeah.
And relationships with agents, relationships with players do mean something. You hear about it in the NFL all the time about how the teams kind of do certain favors for the agents. You don't really hear about it as much in the MLB, but it is important to just keep relationships strong. And um, I like the move. Nick Quintana, who they brought back, is repeating high A and 24 years old, so his stats look good, but I don't take, too
Yeah.
much thought into the former second rounder, I believe. But yeah, the Tucker Barnhart trade, I mean,
And if you want to be if you want to put an extra feather in the Reds cap, I mean Barnhart's not having a good year either. So
no.
and not to say that that's something they foresaw coming, but it's just the reality here. It's not like you're really losing players. It's not like if Tucker Barnhart was on the Reds this year, they're suddenly in contention, right?
Right.
I think the one guy that has really excelled in his new home, I guess we could talk about Suarez in a bit, but Sonny Gray has looked good, but you get a high upside prospect in Chase Petty. And I think considering where this team is, it also cleared open a rotation spot. We're seeing a lot of young pitching get opportunities this year that could pay dividends into the future. So what do you think about the Sonny Gray trade and also what we've seen that do for the current rotation, giving these other guys some chances?
Yeah, I think Sonny Gray was a pitcher who struggled to go over 5 innings. He struggled with back issues, and anyone that's had back issues knows those linger. He
Also,
was on and off
not
the
to cut you
IL.
off, but also if I was the Reds and I was looking to sell, I would look at Tyler Mahle and I would look at Luis Castillo, and I'd say those are guys that I think can improve their value in the season. We've seen Sonny Gray fall off a cliff. So that might have been a thought too of let's make sure we get some value here now.
Yeah, and he's a good pitcher. He's been on the IL I think 2 times already this season,
Yeah.
going five or 6 innings, but producing, and good for him. He has a $12 million option for next year. It just really wasn't in the long term plans to keep someone that age, so they sold him at what they thought was his highest value. Chase Petty, first round pick, electric arm in low A. When people get really upset about returns, um, I always just remind people, like, it's not like the Twins were the first team to call and say, "Here's what we're gonna do," and they said, "Okay." Like,
Yeah.
the market determines itself, and sometimes the return could be better. You hope for it to be better, but the Reds did not accept the first thing that they heard. They shopped around, and this was what they saw as the best return. And he's played well in high A. Still a long way to go, but I like how they kind of staggered their returns. They have 24-year-olds, 20-year-olds, 19-year-olds, so that when they do all reach, they're all different levels of arb and experience.
And you're trying to build something more long term, not a 2-3 year window like the one they just went through. You're hoping to have something a little more sustainable. And if some of these guys pop, if in 3 years Chase Petty's an ace, you're going to look at that trade a lot different. Obviously, the biggest trade is the Jesse Winker Eugenio. I usually love his name, dude. Gino Eugenio Suarez. I think I nailed it that time. But the thing about this trade, before we get into the return and everything else, I mean, perfect time to capitalize on Jesse Winker's value off an all-star year. And Suarez was money you kind of need to get off the books anyway. It just clears up some room for your future. And obviously Suarez has been a little bit better than Winker. So let's just talk about the major league pieces and then we'll talk about the return next.
Yeah, so I think Winker's a super good player. And he showed that he's a 120 WRC plus every year of his career. I'm pretty sure. I mean, don't quote me on that, but he's limited against lefties. In fact, he's been terrible against lefties. He's hitting them well this season, but
Yeah.
not hitting righties now. He showed some pop, which was good in Great American Ballpark. He's a terrible fielder,
Yep.
and one of the worst base runners you've ever seen. And on top of all that, he has suffered injuries every single year. He's an injury-prone player. Hell, he missed a big chunk of last year, which is when the Reds started to go down. I think they sold high on him. I love him. I love the guy. I love the player. But you sold at his highest value, and you got off of that Suarez deal. Suarez needed a change of scenery, and he is what he is. He's a third baseman who will hit home runs and
That's
You
it.
know, that's
No,
about
that's
it.
literally
He's
it.
kind of like a Miguel Sano, only more personality, I guess.
Yeah, and so what did you like most about the prospect return they got back? Because they did get, what was it, 4 guys here?
So they got Justin Dunn, former top 126-year-old starting pitcher, maybe a bullpen piece, maybe a fifth starter. Regardless, he's a former top prospect and a former Mets
Yep,
prospect,
pretty live
and
arm.
still a little bit upside. I'm not gonna say he has a lot of upside, but a piece that could log MLB innings, at least be an inning eater once he's healthy. Jake Fraley's kind of a fourth outfielder type, can play all three outfield spots. Has shown at times his ability to get on base. You know, fourth outfielder who's cheap under team control goes a long way in a
Yeah,
small market team. And then the two pieces that are most exciting are Brandon Williamson, starting pitcher, 23 or 24 years old in Double A right now, lefty, and a top 100. I believe he was top 60 in just baseball's top 100. Um, has been okay. That this year has had a couple of rough outings, but also large stretches of being good. So he's someone who can factor in. Some people said this year. It's looking more like next year. And then the player to be named is the most interesting piece. Connor Phillips, super young arm. Um, I believe Aram had him in the top 10 of the Mariners system preseason, which is a deep system,
yeah.
before getting traded over. And he's just really looked great. Tons of movement. Um, the fact, everyone just writes him off because he was the player to be named, and those players typically are just pretty bad.
I'm pretty sure
He's
Trey
been,
Turner was once a player to be named later, though, if I'm
yeah,
not
he
mistaken.
was.
So it can happen.
Yeah, he's been good. They have players for next year or this year with Fraley and Dunn, the year after and the future, all in one trade. And cleared up 11 million for Suarez, which he's worth 11 million. Don't get me wrong. If that's what your team needs,
And
it's
if
just
you
a
don't
third
have Mike
baseman possession.
Moustakas already,
That's a different
which
story for a different day.
that is. Speaking of money not well spent, Nick Castellanos. I know Reds fans loved him. I know he had a monster season. He went to another bandbox in Philly. It hasn't worked out so far. I'm sure he'll hit again. But if you're not going to win for the next 2 years, and you're talking about a player in his 30s, if I'm not mistaken,
Yep,
a
30.
5-year deal, the first 2 years of that deal where he would have been good, maybe he makes them a little bit closer to 500. But considering the direction that you were going, it didn't make sense to sign him. And, we could talk about Lorenzen too. I understand he's had a good year with the Angels, but we didn't know that he was going to be able to take off in that starting role. And I don't think that that's something that you should really be, crying over spilled milk about. These are two guys that I think needed to go somewhere else to try to get better roles and opportunities elsewhere. And the Reds didn't need to spend money there.
Lorenzen, I think that was a mutual, if not him just wanting a new opportunity to start. He's been really good. Not really good. I mean, he's a solid fifth or fourth guy. Castellanos, 35 years old. I know you being a Mets guy have watched him. He sucks in the outfield.
Terrible.
Absolutely terrible. He's now a $20 million DH. And keep in mind, in 2020, he had an opt out. And he
Mm-hmm.
didn't opt out because he wasn't that good. No other team was going to pay him $16 million. So
Yeah.
that really tells you how much of a 2021 helped him. And he was great. He really was. It was a career year. I am of the belief of not signing a small market team. Now, there are exceptions to this. Coming off of career years at 30 years old, I'm always weary about that long-term deal, especially for a guy who's a DH. You can put him in right field and call him that. He is a DH. It is
Mm-hmm.
miserable out there. In the Reds, I'm sure you see a theme. Here's players who are going to be somewhat expensive, and they have pretty drastic flaws in their game. A whole team of that is just not going to work. Look at the Phillies right now.
Yeah, and also look at Brandon Drury outproducing Nick Castellanos for $900,000. So that's the type of signing you make when you're a rebuilding team. You take some flyers. Brandon Drury had good numbers with the Mets last year. I saw it firsthand. Not easy to be shuttled back and forth, triple at big leagues. Triple at big leagues, get 2 at bats a week against the one left-handed reliever. And he did well for the Mets. And now you're seeing with regular playing time, granted hitting in a great ballpark to hit in. Brandon Drury, as I wrote this week, looking like the Reds all-star this year. What has he brought Tommy Pham? Just little signs like that they can now maybe turn into another prospect or two at the deadline.
Tommy Pham signing was super late in spring. 1 year with an extra option year, which is interesting because the way he's hitting now, he sucked in the beginning of the year, but he didn't have spring training. So it took him some time to get up. He's been on fire. And we all know a team could use a Tommy Pham, a guy who's been there before now, antics aside and personality aside.
Fantasy
7
aside.
million is really not that expensive for someone who is a hitter the quality of Tommy Pham. And if you like him, you can pick up that option, but you don't have to if you don't want to. He's not going to cost a ton in terms of a trade. But the Reds brought in a vet. They needed an outfielder. They needed to get better against hitting lefties. Pham's been a great fit. Brandon Drury, my God, do I have to eat crow? He was the one like spring training player that I picked that was like, this is embarrassing if he's getting starts at shortstop and third. Like Brandon Drury should not make the opening day roster. Like this is a cast off 30-year-old who's bounced around organizations. And look at me now. I'm reading articles that you wrote about him being an all-star. So I love to be wrong on things like that. He's just been fantastic, and he's been able to play all over. Whether he gets moved or not, I know that you and I talked offline about this. I think he gets moved just because the Reds, if they're going to be selling high on players, which is kind of what they need to be doing, this is the perfect example of a sell high guy, right?
Yeah.
Inexpensive. And I mean, if you want to extend him, it's probably $4 million per year. Larger contenders can do that if they want a utility type player. Playing really well. I have to mention Albert Almora Jr., who has somehow like hit some home runs and a grand slam and like poking the ball the other way and like it's stuff that I just have never seen Albert Almora Jr. do. And Matt Reynolds has been good. The only thing I can think of, all three of these guys played for the Mets. What is
Yep.
going on in New York? Is there something in the water there?
It's crazy. There is a certain thing that I can tell you from experience that when guys leave the Mets, they generally have career years elsewhere. We saw it with Travis d'Arnaud with the Braves. We previously saw it with Daniel Murphy going to the Nationals, Justin Turner with the Dodgers. Wilmer Flores has been very solid since leaving. So we have seen former Mets find success. The one I'm not surprised about is Drury. The other two, stunning to me. Because Almora just didn't look like a major league hitter last year. I mean, he's a great defensive center fielder, but good God, terrible at bats. Matt Reynolds, I told you, like you said, we talked about, I literally thought he was coaching for the Reds. I didn't think he was playing anymore. I didn't think that he was still a baseball player. And he's hitting well. So I think the bottom line here is we're always so quick to judge these teams off and off season. And rightfully so. You know, this is what we do. This is how we enjoy baseball. We love to analyze things. But I think that what we can see is that the Reds at least have a direction right now. And you look at a team like the Rockies, for example, like what the hell did they do? You know, you look at their offseason. They just gave Chris Bryant a bunch of money. It didn't really line up. They just recently dumped money in there and not like there's no direction. And so if you're a Reds fan who's upset right now, the thing I would say from an outside observer is at least there's a direction. And the only way this team's ever going to be great is if Hunter Green and some of these guys become superstars and you have a foundation to build around. And then's the pressure on the ownership to spend. But right now it's that time to see which stars can develop here. And I think they've given themselves a lot of cracks at those types of players.
Yeah, and before we close, I want to just clarify because a lot of people say that we don't have a direction, the Reds don't have a direction. I think the direction is clear, and I kind of highlighted at the end of the article there. The Reds cleared money from 2024. They're not going to pick up the contract of Moustakas or the option for Moustakas or Votto. They don't have a single guaranteed contract on the books. So what that means is they're going to have all the money that they want. Right now, they're filtering young players. I always say, you know, develop and direction, or the two things in a rebuild. Right now, they're in the develop and they're establishing the direction. In my opinion, get as many of these prospects who are ready for the MLB experience now, see where you have holes come 2024, 2025, use that influx of money to fill those holes with established major leaguers. You mentioned the Rockies. They're just giving everybody an extension because they have trouble getting free agents there unless they drastically overpay. The Reds are not doing that, and in my opinion, that's smart. You don't need to be giving out massive extensions to everybody that shows a glimpse of hope. And just cross your fingers. With tied up money, financial flexibility is so important in a small
Yeah.
market team, and right now, the Reds have that. The question just becomes, will ownership spend when the time comes? And I think that they will.
And the
I don't
last
have a ton of
time,
confidence in that, but I think that they will.
and I will say the last time that they spent, they had no problem getting hitters. I think that if I'm a pitcher, I would want a pretty big bag to go say, all right, I'm going to go pitch in Great American Ballpark for half my starts. But if I'm a hitter and I'm a top free agent and you're telling me I can go play in that ballpark for half of my games on an up and coming team, I think it is a very attractive free agent destination in a couple of years. And so, like you said, 2024, 2025, that's when we're going to really find out what this build means. But for now, I think that a team that was maybe the most scrutinized this offseason really didn't deserve it. So definitely check out Clay's article. Again, you can find it in the description or just by going to justbaseball.com. And we're going to continue doing some videos like this, breaking down some of the great articles that we have going up daily on the website. Perfect.